So hello and welcome to the video, and welcome to Osterley Station, by far the most osterly station on the entire tube network. I'm travelling today to Heathrow Terminal 2, where I will be flying down to Larnaca in Cyprus. My preferred partner when achieving Star Alliance status is Aegean Airlines, for reasons I explained in quite some detail in this video here. I've achieved silver with them, and the route to gold is greatly accelerated if you take 4 flights on Aegean or on their sister airline Olympic. So today I'll be flying from London down to Athens on Aegean, connecting to a flight across to Larnaca on Olympic Airways. Quite a tight connection, but they sold it to me, so it should be fine, I'm sure. I bought this ticket last year and was intending to fly in early January as a bit of a birthday treat, but back in January a fairly ridiculous testing regime existed, which means, unbelievably, for a 3-night stay in Cyprus I would have needed to take 7 or possibly 8 tests. So I decided that was just a bad idea and postponed the trip until today. When I booked that flight, I also booked it into economy class, and for reasons I'll explain a bit later on in the video, both of the flights I'm taking today have ended up being in business class. I'm sure I'll cope. Now, I flew on Aegean's business class before down to Cairo, and it was an awfully timed flight, departing at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I think the crew hated it, and unfortunately that carried through into not a brilliant customer experience. So I'm quite excited to see whether the full Aegean daytime experience is much better than the one that I reported in this video here previously. And I have very little idea what to expect on my Olympic Airways flight either. So if you'd like to see what the business class experience on Aegean and its sister airline Olympic is like, and if you'd like to see some comedy footage of me running through Athens Airport to make my connection... Hello. 2 of the things I just said turn out to not be true. The perils of making your intro video before you actually take the trip, rather than being sneaky and making it at the end when you're certain about what happened. Now, the first of those things is pretty insignificant, and we'll have a bit of a giggle about it later. The second, though, was an honest mistake that I'll explain later, but for now, let's just say that if you were excited about seeing Olympic Airways, you might be a little bit disappointed. And all of that is even more reason, I'd say, to stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years, I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe to see where I go next, and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
Heathrow doesn't really show its best face when you arrive by tube. It's all quite efficient, but it's just a bit bleak. As usual with Heathrow, if given a choice between a lift or an escalator, the lift is usually the better bet. So the Queen's Terminal, Terminal 2 at Heathrow, close to where the first terminal buildings were constructed in the 50s. That's 11 years before the airport was even called Heathrow. It's home to Star Alliance, as well as a handful of airlines not in any global alliance. Also home to Aeroflot. I was tempted to go and register my displeasure at Russia's actions in Ukraine, but the prevalence of CCTV coverage meant that what I was planning to do might have got me into trouble. I could have checked in online, but I like to show the check-in process in my videos. Zone B1 for Aegean business class. The agent was camera shy, but she needn't have been. She was great. I didn't need a passenger locator form for Greece, as I was in transit, but I needed one for Cyprus, which was quickly validated, and I was issued with a single boarding pass for both flights. Only the second time this has ever happened, so well done Alaska Air and Aegean. Heathrow wasn't particularly busy, as this was the early afternoon. A fast-track channel was available for business class passengers, although it was actually busier than the regular security lane would have been. Hey-ho, still pretty speedy though. Terminal 2 is a good-looking building. Aegean offers access to the Lufthansa lounge, which I've reviewed before, earlier in the day though. It's a pleasant space and perfectly comfortable for an hour or 2. Some fairly substantial hot food offerings. The meatballs were really nice. plus a very German bread menu. There was also a cold counter with cheeses and other goodies, a really good range of foods all in all. On the alcoholic drink side, some beers and wines but no spirits. My previous visit had been at breakfast time, so I'd wondered whether any spirits came out later, but if they do, it's after lunchtime. And 2 beer taps. I've pulled a few beers in my time, but I've never encountered any tap in any airport lounge that delivers anything other than foam. No exception here. Much more success with a bottle. Unlike my last visit, the Senator section was open. Access was granted with a separate docket issued on entering the lounge. This is available to Star Alliance Gold Card holders and people connecting onto a first class flight, so not me just yet. I couldn't see any spirits in there either, but the angle I had was not conclusive. Off to the gate, actually the same one as I departed from on my last visit, and just like previously, there was some confusion at the gate as people who had checked in online were called forward to present their documentation for inspection. I still think airlines should require people to get their documents validated at check-in rather than creating confusion at the departure gate, but perhaps that's why I'm making videos rather than running an airline. I did remember to get a shot of the plane we would fly on, even if only about 20% of it was visible. Pretty quickly it was time to board. Business class was called forward as part of Group 2. I guess I'll find out if Star Golds are in Group 1 when I get there. Unfortunately, Aegean adopts Ryanair's buffer people in the boarding finger strategy. Not a hugely premium experience, and as it is easily avoidable, it's obviously a deliberate strategy. Not a major issue in London at this time of the year, but it can get quite unpleasant if it's very hot or cold. My video's timestamps tell me that it was a 6-minute wait. And eventually onto the plane, a 2-year-old Airbus A320neo. 7 rows of business today, although like a few European airlines, the curtain can be moved back and forth to meet demand for the premium cabin. I was in row 4. So perhaps 32 inches of legroom, not exactly abundant, but good enough for a 4-hour flight. The middle seat is kept free, and that is communicated with this tray insert thingy. Headrests with adjustable wings which provided some support if you wanted to sleep. This equipment is used on overnight flights, and even with the business class conveniences, I think it might be a bit of a struggle to get a decent sleep. An in-flight magazine in the literature slot and a device for holding a phone or tablet. I'll look at the in-flight entertainment shortly. Quite a substantial in-flight shopping magazine too. I am perplexed as to whether every plane carries every item. A trolley did go through the plane later on, which looked pretty laden, but it would be quite a challenge to provision everything onto every flight. We pushed back pretty much bang on time. Remember, I have a tight connection, so I was watching the clock a little. We took off into another uninspiring London winter sky. I had mentioned earlier that I'd postponed this trip from January as the testing requirements were too onerous. Had I travelled when I'd originally planned, I'd have needed a PCR test to board a plane to Cyprus, with another one required immediately on arriving into the country. I'd have had to isolate at my hotel until that test result came back, plus they'd give me a pack of lateral flow tests to take each day I was in the country. On the 3rd day in the country, I would have then been required to attend a government facility for another test. That makes 6 tests required by the Cypriot government. Back in January, I'd have also needed a test to board the plane back to the UK. I never worked out whether I could have used one of the Cyprus tests to cover this, but assuming not, that would have been test 7, and then the day 2 test after returning to the UK would have been test 8. Which, for a 3-night stay, I think you'll agree, was a little daft. I'll talk more about the test requirements and other restrictions that prevailed when I did go in a video I'm making about my time in Cyprus. An uninspiring sky, but we did turn quite sharply back to the south and got a decent view of Heathrow before we hit the clouds. Immediately after takeoff, the lady in front of me insisted on reclining her seat, and she kept it reclined for almost the entire flight. That is her right, and I certainly could have done the same, but it did cramp my space somewhat. Just after crossing the coast of France, the infamous Aegean tablecloth was delivered and service began. We weren't offered the opportunity to have a pre-dinner drink, which is a little disappointing. It's a 4-hour flight, so there is plenty of time to have done so. The meal was served all on one tray and comprised a Greek salad, followed by a somewhat stereotypical choice of chicken or beef. Not sure what vegetarians would have picked, but I picked the chicken. Then some Greek cheeses and a wonderful tahini tart. I'll share the menus at the end of the video. I like Aegean's food. All of the meals I've had on Aegean have had a strong Greek feel to them, as a national airline's food should have. I usually come across something I don't much like, but that's fine, as it's fun to have your palate challenged. Plus, the meals have all been quite substantial, so skipping an element has not left me unsatisfied. On this occasion I didn't love the tomatoes, but I don't love raw tomatoes in any environment, so I can't be critical of Aegean on that one. All served with a thimble of quite respectable wine. Did I mention that the tahini tart was delicious? I did manage to get my wine thimble refilled, and after dinner I opted for a glass of Metaxa brandy. A bit of an acquired taste, but over the course of the trips I've taken with Aegean, I've been able to find the time to acquire that taste. A quick pit stop in the loo, which was another airplane loo. My expectations are always very low when entering airplane facilities, which means I am rarely disappointed. Limited entertainment was delivered to your device via the plane's Wi-Fi. It wasn't hugely intuitive, and I couldn't see how you might be able to connect through to the internet, but it was better than nothing. Perhaps the only in-flight entertainment system in the world that offers you books to read but no movies to watch. There was also a moving map, but it was very tricky to reconfigure it in a way that actually showed you where you were. A bit of turbulence, but the flight passed very quickly, and before I knew it, we were descending into Athens. So to wrap up the Aegean business class experience, it's really good. The seats could be an inch or two further apart, and the wine thimbles should certainly be larger, but it's a very good seat with very good food and very good service. My criticism, because I feel I need to be critical of something, is that the service is perhaps trying to be too good. I said I procured a refill of wine, which was willingly provided, but doing so took a while. The crew adopts the high-end service standard of only servicing one customer at a time. Each request is satisfied as received, with the drink delivered on a tray. Which is great, and it's the kind of service you'd expect at the Lanesborough Hotel or in Air France's La Première cabin. But for 25 passengers in a business class cabin, it really slows things down. I think a more pragmatic service standard would be appropriate, alongside bigger glasses, which would reduce the frequency of needing refills. A pre-dinner drinks round on a 4-hour flight is probably not an unreasonable expectation either. Not major criticisms by any means, but they are the best that I could come up with. We made up some time on the flight down, so landed a good 25 minutes ahead of schedule. As a non-Schengen arrival, we were diverted away from the main terminal, down some stairs and onto a bus. Usually this isn't a great precursor for a pleasant and efficient arrival experience, but Aegean held back the economy passengers such that the business class only bus was rolling pretty swiftly. Into the terminal, and the transit area was immediately to the left on entry. So immediately, in fact, that I didn't have time to turn my camera on before I would have had to turn it off again to go through security. Then up an escalator into the terminal. Extremely efficient, which meant my connection wasn't even remotely stressful, so there will be no footage of me running. The first of my predictions that turned out to be false. This is the non-Schengen wing of Athens Airport, which isn't as shiny and pleasant as the Schengen wing, but it's still nice enough. Cyprus isn't allowed into the Schengen area currently because of the whole North Cyprus border thing. My connection ended up being so comfortable that I was able to make a pit stop in the lounge. I'd had to spend 7 hours there a while back, so I knew it quite well, and it was quite busy. I talked about this lounge in more detail in this video. On to the gate. I was departing that night from gate A1, which was beyond the gate used for the later Cairo flight that featured in that earlier video, so the Corridor of Doom arrangement was not yet in force. A 30-minute boarding delay was announced after I got to the gate, which was a little annoying, but I wasn't inspired to head all the way back to the lounge, so waited it out at the gate. Then boarding began. I must have been a little fatigued at this point. In preparing this video, I can see there were some clues as to what was about to happen, but I was obviously on autopilot as I made my way through to the plane, which was an Aegean aircraft. Me again. When I booked this trip originally for January, the legs from Athens to Larnaca were marketed by Aegean and operated by Olympic. When I shifted the flights to March, the schedules had obviously changed, so they were marketed by Aegean and operated by Aegean, and I didn't notice. Now, Aegean didn't notify me of this change. I'm not sure whether they should have, perhaps they could have, but they didn't. But anyway, this point in the video was the first moment where I realised this wasn't going to be an Olympic flight. So back to the video. So this was an Aegean Airbus A321, actually a larger plane for the 1 hour flight to Larnaca than we'd had down from London. But fundamentally it was the same setup and the same service as my first flight. A little disappointing that I didn't get to see what the Olympic Air experience was like, but I guess I'll have to save that for when I need to renew my Star Alliance Gold. Another very substantial feed was offered, quite remarkable for a 1 hour flight. On this occasion, I didn't much love the celeriac and potato mash that accompanied my sea bream. We largely made up the delay in flight, so landed into Larnaca just a few minutes late at 1 AM. I'd been scheduled to arrive just 1 hour after that onerous testing regime was scheduled to be removed, but Cyprus accelerated that date by a week, so the new procedures had had time to bed in. I believe people were randomly selected for a spot test, but I obviously looked like a healthy specimen, so I was not selected. I'd originally paid £304 for economy class flights to and from Larnaca. I received 2 upgrade coupons when I reached silver within the Aegean scheme, so I had requested upgrades for the legs to and from London. Both had hit, but I'd only accepted 1 upgrade at the point when I decided to postpone the trip. Annoyingly, the upgrade voucher that had been applied was not returned to me when I rescheduled, so I lost it. But I was able to recycle the other voucher that hadn't been accepted, so was able to upgrade my return flight from Athens to London. Aegean also offers an upgrade challenge after booking. For the London to Athens leg, you could bid between €126 and €325 for an upgrade, and for the shorter Athens to Larnaca legs, you could bid between €75 and €300. The day before the flight, Aegean would then review the bids and accept them if they met Aegean's secret unpublished criteria. I lodged a minimum bid for both of the outbound legs, certain that they wouldn't hit, but keen to show the process in this video, and wouldn't you know it, both hit. I can only assume that Aegean really needed my cash, as the bids were accepted about a week out from travel. So alongside a small rebooking fee when I shifted the dates, the trip ended up costing me over £500, which I hadn't really budgeted for. Another annoying detail in the small print is that if you upgrade via voucher or upgrade challenge, you earn the status points of the original economy booking. So I earned 4,990 tier points into the Aegean scheme for the trip, plus 5,489 award miles, which were the tier miles boosted by 10% as I have silver status. That would have been 6.1 pence per point had I taken the itinerary I'd originally booked. I recently made a video which showed that you could get tier points into Aegean scheme for less than 5p each, so this rate was decent but not outstanding, although it did achieve the 4 Aegean flights I need to accelerate the process of achieving gold. Remember, I'll make a video about that process as and when I get there. But as I ended up paying a chunk more for upgrades, the points ended up costing over 10p each, which isn't great, but I had fun, which is half the battle. So thanks for watching, please like, comment and subscribe, the usual drill, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.